So what do you do for a living?
I work at Seven County Services. I'm a data and project manager. So there's a couple projects that I manage, some of which are exclusively about data.
And what did you do before that?
Before that, I was unemployed for like 9 months, and I helped take care of my dad, who just moved here, and I babysat my niece and nephew.
Mm-hmm. And what did you go to school for?
I have a bachelor's in psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and I have minors in philosophy, women's studies, and sociology.
Oh.
Makes me the triple threat. And I have a master's in public health.
And what was your motivation to go into that field?
For As an undergrad, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did well in psychology in high school, and it was interesting to me. I knew that I didn't want to be a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I started taking some sociology classes, and those were more interesting to me than psychology. I didn't have a track in mind. Um, I got a master's in public health because I knew I wanted to go back to school and get a graduate degree. I'd been working in research at an academic medical center for a long time, and the data piece was interesting to me, population piece, and it just made sense. We had a graduate school there, and they paid like 75% of my tuition. It was a good fit for me ultimately. Kind of followed the path that was available.
So you only took it because that's what you could, or did you have like any personal reasons for wanting to go into public health?
I'd been working in oncology, but not for very long at that point. I'd thought about going into medicine later. It had always been interesting to me. Um, but I did not have the mindset when I went to college that you need to study something so that you can get a job and make money one day. It wasn't until later in life with some more work experience and getting my master's, I think, where it started to click for me.
Um, so like in your line of work, do you ever come across the question of uh, the human dignity?
Oh yeah, ethics is. I mean, there's a huge thread of ethics throughout my career. Um, I was a philosophy minor in college, and I've had some long-standing interests in euthanasia and right to death. Um,
Talk about those a little bit.
that's probably the one I'm the least interested in, but I mean, there are a whole bunch of ethical questions that cross the continuum of the lifespan that interact with medicine. One of which is, what defines birth, what defines death, when is a person a person,
Mm-hmm.
um, when is a person no longer a person, and they just intersect with medicine, so it's always been interesting to me. I've been able to follow that area of interest by focusing a little bit more on research ethics and human subjects. And one of the things that has made me personally interested in that is a lot of the current code of ethics is born out of what happened during World War II,
Mm-hmm.
and the Nuremberg trials and the experiments on
Hmm.
prisoners. And my family left Czechoslovakia in 1948, so there's a personal connection of sorts.
Okay. So in your line of work, the question that I would pose to you is, do you ever think that a person loses their dignity?
Absolutely. In medical care, um,
And as a person in general?
absolutely. For a whole bunch of different reasons, little cuts, big cuts, systematic ways,
Mm-hmm.
unintended ways.
And do you think that people, no matter what scenario, should be treated with dignity?
Absolutely. I mean, even carrying it toward, you know, my personal belief is that a body is separate from a soul, but even after someone has died, in most religions, most cultures, it's really important to treat a dead body with respect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the things that uniquely defines, humanity, is that respect. And maybe carrying it on in different ways outside of our own species.
Right. So another question that I would pose to you would be the concept of a just war.
Mm-hmm.
Is there such a thing?
I don't think so, but I'm a big believer in diplomacy solutions, and there's no war, and I don't think it's ultimately totally pragmatic, because
Mm-hmm.
there's some I have a line in the sand somewhere too, but I don't know. I don't know how war could be just.
True. So how would you think in your everyday life that you treat other humans with dignity and respect, and in your everyday life, how do you see what you do and who you are is beneficial?
Well, at least in terms of treating other people with dignity, I have some good examples. So I just started working for 7 Counties, which is the safety net behavioral health provider in the region, and I'm out at sites sometimes because I work in the corporate office, and it's important to me to look. It doesn't matter if someone's a client or someone else who works there or whomever else. You still should look people in the eye and say hello, and I'm going to hold the door for someone just like I would for anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to treat people as people and not as an illness or diagnosis or a burden,
Mm-hmm.
but as other people. I think that answers in part.
Do you have anything else that you think
Exemplifies treating other people with dignity?
Mm-hmm. Or just I guess my overall question for you would just be a lot of people feel as though they're what they do and who they are has a drive towards something, and that a lot of times that comes through in what they do and
Purpose?
yeah. So did you have when you got into what you did, was part of it for helping other people, and if that was the reason, was there any personal motivation for you to want to help people?
So, the only thing, and I've said this since maybe even college, the only thing I ever knew I wanted to do was do something that made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's subjective. But for me, that's sort of the helping professions, and public service are ways you can do that. My dad worked for the federal government for 30 years. He was in the military for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's dad was not, he was an immigrant, but he worked for the federal government, for the U.S. government for 20 years, 25 years. So I think that maybe influenced that decision to want to contribute in some way.
Yeah.
And I've worked, the only job I've worked in the for-profit sector was about 10 months. I worked for Starbucks. I was freelancing, and I was 30, and I was paying $700 or $900 a month for Cobra,
Mm-hmm.
and it was cheaper for me to work at Starbucks for $7.25 an hour, and it taught me some good skills. But it's definitely been a thread in my career. It's all nonprofits. In college, I worked at the Y. Then I worked at an academic medical center. Then I worked for a medical specialty society. They're all 403B nonprofit organizations. Maybe.
So outside of your work, do you see yourself doing some of the same things? Not just as
Trying to
a
contribute.
professional, but yeah.
I started volunteering somewhere over the summer, I guess, or towards the end of the summer, maybe even later. An organization for to support women who are getting abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done some demonstrations and stuff over, mostly when I was younger, against the war and
Yeah.
different stuff to help women who wanted reproductive freedom. Other ways, but with family and with friends, community is important to me in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that counts the same way.
I mean, sure it does. You treating someone with respect, or even just opening up to other people, is a form of compassion.
I like that notion. Well, it's it's easy, I think, to make a connection with someone if you try,
Mhm.
and if you listen to what people are saying to you. This is a random story, and I wish the thing wasn't on almost. I called Macy's the other day to cancel delivery, and I randomly am talking to this woman for a couple minutes, and she was saying something about being really stressed out, and she said my mom's really sick, and I ended up talking to this woman for like 10 minutes whose mom is dying, and it's and I worked in oncology, and I don't know, and I told her I don't know anything about anything, but my grandmother went in hospice, and but it was just 10 minutes of, and what it didn't matter for me. I mean, obviously it did because I'm talking about it now, like a week later,
Mhm.
but making a connection with someone for a moment, and I think we're not always comfortable doing that. But like the guy tonight at dinner, you didn't have to speak to him. I mean, there were how many tables were there? 4 or 5 groups of people sitting outside, and no one else spoke to him. I don't know. I hope so, though. That's why I'm here,
Mhm. Is to help other people.
or at least to make a connection. Maybe to help, but that feels too heavy.
I can't think of anything else.